It was January 2001, a hot summer night. Inside the Molly Clark home, the air conditioning hummed away. The kids were tucked up in bed. Courtney was checked at 1 a.m., and she was still sleeping, but by 7 a.m., she was gone. Panic took hold. The parents called the police. Brothers Nathan and Justin ran from door to door, hoping that she'd simply wandered off. Within just half an hour, North Wind Avenue was crawling with search teams. Bushland, garages, rooftops. Nothing was off limits. But at 10:47 a.m., they found her. She was lying in the long grass of a vacant lot. She was dressed only in a nappy. Her time on this earth had come to an end. The sharp implement used in the event was still nearby. And within hours, the boy from the top of the street was in handcuffs. Port Clare wasn't the kind of place where doors stayed locked, a sleepy suburb nestled on the New South Wales Central Coast. It was quiet, leafy, and middle class, the kind of place where kids roamed in packs and where neighbors could still go and borrow a bowl of sugar. North Wind Avenue was especially tight-knit. Families there threw Christmas parties in the cul-de-sac, and every year the same couple hosted. They lived at the top of the hill. They were well-liked, polite, and professional. And living with them was their adopted son, a boy known only to us as SLD. SLD had arrived on the street at around age 4. His past was murky. Some said that he had come from a troubled background, possibly from addict parents, or maybe even worse. But what was clear even then was that something about him felt off. He tried to make friends with the other kids, but they avoided him. Some said that he was eerie or creepy. Others just said that he was lonely. He'd follow younger children. He'd play by himself for hours, and sometimes he'd stare for just a little too long. SLD went to a special school. He didn't cause real trouble there, but he did make people feel uneasy. But still, no one really imagined exactly what he was capable of. Certainly not the Molly Clark family, his adoptive parents' friends. The Molly Clarks lived just 300 meters down the road. Their daughter Courtney was a bubbly and mischievous 3-year-old. She played barefoot in the driveway. She made everyone laugh, and she definitely adored her 2 older brothers, Nathan and Justin. And on the night that it happened, the parents nor the boys heard a thing. SLD had vanished from his home. On the night that Courtney vanished, he told police that he'd simply been out walking. Then he quickly changed his story. Eventually, he took them to the scene. "I saint her in the heart," he said. Then he showed them where he left the body. Courtney had been pulled from her bed, carried across the street, and then the sharp kitchen implement was used. A pool of red DNA was found on a concrete driveway, and beside it a sharp kitchen implement normally used for meat. When they asked the boy why, he gave them a chilling answer. SLD's motive for doing this to Courtney Molly Clark wasn't rooted in any personal grievance against her. It was an act of revenge, disturbingly misdirected. SLD admitted that his original intention was simply to get back at Courtney's older brother, a boy whom he claimed had bullied and teased him. But when he turned up at the house that night, he says he changed his mind, that she was just the means to an end. It seems like he realized that doing this would be a far more impactful revenge than simply going after the boy. In a moment when police brought SLD back to the crime scene, he was calm. He was dressed in a green t-shirt and floral surf shorts. He retraced his steps through the vacant lot. He didn't cry, nor did he flinch. He pointed out the red, the sharp object, the position of the body, and then he just talked. He told them how he crept out of his adopted home sometime after 1 a.m., slipping silently down the dark street. He says he cut through the Molly Clark screen door, and then he walked into Courtney's room. He says that she didn't wake. He picked her up. He carried her across the road and then brought her to the overgrown grass lot. Then he did what he did. He lunged at her just one time with precision, in a move that would pierce her heart. At first, investigators couldn't believe what they were hearing. Was this actually true? Or was it a strange, sick fantasy? Or perhaps he was taking the fall for someone else? Police looked deeper into SLD, and a bigger picture started to pull into focus. He was 13, so surely there couldn't be too much history there. But, well, he'd previously been caught trying to coerce another girl into exposing herself to him just 1 week earlier at a holiday resort. She survived, although I'm sure that event did have lasting effects. However, Courtney would be even less fortunate than her, and even with everything he'd done, SLD remained disturbingly detached. One officer recalled that when he asked him how he felt, SLD said only, "I thought it would get easier after the first one." There was no remorse. There was no trying to run or hide. It seems he just wanted to start his journey into becoming a monster. SLD was charged with kidnapping and murder. Given his age, he was just barely over the threshold of criminal responsibility. In court, his lawyers pushed for psychiatric assessments, but the facts were clear. This wasn't a confused accident. It was planned. It seems he actually wanted to do it. The judge called it an exceedingly disturbing killing. It was cruel and inexplicable. In August 2002, he was sentenced to 20 years in custody. He was 14 when he entered prison. He would remain behind bars for nearly all of his youth, along with a portion of his adulthood. Prison really did not rehabilitate SLD. In fact, it seemed to sharpen him and make him worse. Over the years, he became known to guards as manipulative, volatile, and calculating. He made weapons from razors, pens, and metal scraps, anything that he could find. At 16, he attacked a nurse, putting her in a headlock. At 17, he attacked a juvenile justice worker with a pen. By 24, he was lunging at correctional officers through cell doors. One of them needed 22 stitches. He claimed that an alter ego named Thorne wrote threatening letters to his psychologist. He attempted to throttle staff, intimidate female employees, and he refused illicit substance tests. SLD started fights in the yard, including one notorious brawl with members of the infamous K Brothers gang. The gang pulled weapons, and SLD screamed for help. A group of fellow inmates came to his defense, including convicted murderers and armed robbers. You see, back then, prisoners gave him a pass because of the fact that he had been a minor when he committed his crime. But as the years dragged on, and as new allegations emerged, his protective bubble would shatter. Inside, he was labeled as high risk. Outside, few knew that he even still existed. His identity was permanently suppressed by the court, but when his sentence finally expired in 2021, the question wasn't if he could return to society, it was whether he really should. In 2023, SLD was released into the community under one of the strictest supervision orders in Australian legal history. He was now 36. He'd never held a job, he never rented or owned a home, he'd never had a relationship. He told his doctors that he wanted a girlfriend and an Xbox. But within 95 days, he'd approached nearly 200 women, often multiple in a single day. And concerningly, he often asked them about their children. The last straw, though, came at Bully Beach. SLD was fishing with an NDIS support worker when he began speaking to a mother who was dressing her toddler near the showers. An off-duty corrections officer spotted the ankle monitor, and then they raised the alarm. SLD was arrested, found guilty of breaching his supervision order, and was then sent back to jail for 13 months. The public still didn't know his name, but they knew what he had done. When his 13-month sentence for the breach ended in 2024, the state of New South Wales made a last-ditch effort to keep him locked up. They applied for a continued detention order, an extraordinary measure used only in the most extreme of cases. The argument there was simple. SLD posed a serious, ongoing risk to the public. Psychiatrists described him as deeply institutionalized, emotionally stunted, and obsessed with revenge. He told staff that he was angry at the officer who had reported him. He even admitted to planning revenge every day. One search of his cell uncovered notes with the officer's full name. He had a long history of threats, of outbursts, and a general disregard for authority or rules. Multiple experts now agreed. His risk of violent reoffending was high, but under the law, that still wasn't enough. A judge ruled that while SLD did present a danger, the threshold for indefinite detention hadn't been met. The court couldn't be satisfied to a high degree of probability that he would reoffend. So the order was denied. SLD would walk free again. This time, it would be under a 5-year extended supervision order. There would be strict rules, GPS monitoring, curfews, no encrypted apps, but he would still be out. It was a case which sent shockwaves everywhere, really. Now, the man has been in jail for 24 years. SLD, what do we do with him now? He's got to the point where his sentence had expired. The aim of the game was the date the government wanted to ensure that he'd be locked up for another year. Today, the Supreme Court came out and said, look, they were going to release him on an extended supervision order, and, of course, under that situation, he'll be monitored pretty closely. But doctors, clinical psychologists, even the judge conceded there was a risk that he would reoffend. And that, of course, causes great concern. And for the Homicide Squad people, Homicide Squad support teams who've been watching this case and helping the families of this case. This is what they had to say today. He is at exceptionally high risk of reoffending. So clearly, he is a time bomb. The big question is what happens when they take off some of the supervision and they revert to using people from the National Disability Insurance Scheme to supervise him. That's when the bomb goes off. Looking at the judgment today, it seems that the judge has ruled that, look, if he stays locked up, he's going to be even more dangerous. So we need to get him out into the system and try and, work his way back into a normal life. At 37, he's still got many years ahead of him. So we'll just have to wait and see. He is a risk. But in the meantime, he will be wearing an ankle bracelet and he'll be monitored, as I said. But, still a big concern for a lot of people in the community. A major concern. This decision sparked a quiet outrage. Families in the area felt powerless. Many of them still remembered Courtney, but others had never heard her name. However, now they were being warned that a man with a violent past, a history of breaches, and a fixation on women and children was now living among them. His movements would be controlled, they were told. His freedom conditional. But many still ask the same chilling question. What happens if those conditions slip? What happens when surveillance gets stretched too thin? What happens when the system lets go or fails again? On a quiet Saturday morning in March, SLD stepped out of prison once more. This time, he gave a slight smile to waiting cameras, then he climbed into a car and disappeared. His exact location is secret. His identity is still protected. But we do know the basics. He's now 38 years old. He lives in a halfway house under constant surveillance. His access to the internet is restricted. His movement is tracked. He's not allowed near children, and he's been constantly watched by trained staff, for now, at least. However, that level of oversight is temporary. Within months or years, this level of supervision could lessen, and if history is any guide, we know that mistakes can happen. SLD has spent nearly 2/3 of his life behind bars, and this time, if he breaks the rules again, could he somehow find a way to do something even worse?